Hey guys, in today's video, I'm very excited to show you guys a super exciting and interesting game I played against my good friend and fellow top player, Jackson Smylie, at a recent Scrabble tournament held in Niagara Falls. Now, the game started in a fairly unexciting way for me. Holding 3 E's, a G, an I, an O, and an S, I have nothing better to do than play OG for 10 points and clear out my rack, hoping for some better tiles on my next turn. Thankfully for me, Jackson didn't have anything great either, and he's forced to play Chi for 23 points, easily his best play, getting rid of his Q. I draw what looks like a promising rack, but there are no bingos here, so I play OI for 15 points, not scoring a ton, but I don't really have any way to score more with all these one-pointers, and I keep a super potent leave in EIRST. This looks like my best play. Jackson has a 7-letter word of culminating available on his rack, which does not play, thankfully for me, so he plays a culei for 16 points, which looks pretty solid, especially as it takes out the possibility of me bingoing through either of the 2 E's and OG. Jackson can infer, following my play of OI for just 15 points, I probably have a bingo-prone rack, so it makes a lot of sense for him to try to reduce the chances that I bingo. And luckily for him, I did not draw what I wanted, pulling a Y and another T. No bingos play here, so I play try for 22 points, taking out the scoring spot Jackson just created under his A and keeping still a very nice leave in EIST. Jackson strikes first with Lawweens for 81 points, making his blank an S. It does open a triple-triple with that L, but this is so many more points than Jackson's next best play that it's easily worth it. And I unfortunately draw some more E's, once again holding 3 E's and a G. All I can do is lead for 21, taking out that spot and hoping once and for all I bingo with a nice leave, this time EST. Jackson plays Futon for 32 points in response. A little bit dangerous opening the left-hand side of the board as well as a potential S-hook on the triple line with Futons, but once again, it's so much better than his next play, he's got to do it. And I draw the J, which isn't exactly what I was hoping for, but I do have a nice play here of Jawed for 48 points. I did consider playing Jet for 41 next to the ON of Futon. The leave is a little bit better because it keeps a vowel and unduplicates my T's, but I actually liked leaving Futons open since I have an S in hand and I'm down 80 points, so it's a good thing for me to introduce a little volatility and keep more lines like that open. Jackson responded with Yap for 33 points through the A of Jawed. This looks like a good play, especially with the Z still on scene. That blocks the possibility of me getting the Z and playing Za both ways for over 60 points in that same spot. AEITV isn't the best leave, but it's certainly not terrible, especially considering the pool is now trending a little constant heavy with 37 constants and only 20 vowels unseen. I finally draw a bingo, hitting Estimate from the E in lead for 83 points. Not my only bingo, but easily my highest scoring one. And I have retaken the lead, however, just briefly because Jackson responds with a nice play of Thieve for 41 to the left of Futon. He could consider sacrificing 6 points to play Hive, keeping the nice AET leave, but I agree with Jackson's decision here because turnover seems very important. Not only is there a blank and 3 S's still in the pool, all of which Jackson would love to draw, but the Z and the X are also very important tiles. I just opened up another huge Z spot next to the A of Estimate with my bingo, so a Z is going to score over 60 points very easily, and the X goes very nicely at 4L, making picks an X for over 40 as well. So a lot of stuff Jackson wants to get here, so I agree with his decision to score a few more points and offload a couple more tiles to increase his chances of drawing the good things. I don't draw any of the good things after my bingo, pulling 3 N's, and I'm thinking just like Jackson is here. I don't like any of this stuff on my rack. I want to offload as much of it as possible, so I play Canonic, completely blowing up my rack for 22 points, once again going for the X or the Z, or at the minimum, one of the S's or the blank. Jackson does draw the blank, and he uses it to bingo with Plagued for 71 points. This looks like his best play, and it's his highest scoring bingo by a couple of points. I draw a pretty promising rack, but still no X or Z, and there is unfortunately no bingo here. And I play F for 30 points, which looks correct, keeping a super nice AENRS leave and also scoring some points in the process. I definitely am going to need to bingo at least one more time to catch Jackson, but I also need to make sure I'm scoring well, because I'm down almost 80, and if I don't score enough points, Jackson could accumulate a lead so large that even with a bingo, I'm not going to be able to come back. And Jackson, thankfully for me, draws a bit of a clunky rack here. He plays Walk for 37 points. He sacrifices a couple points over playing Walk here for 39. I agree with his decision. With 3 S's still unseen, there's a strong possibility of me hitting a bingo with Futons, which is going to score very well. I could still bingo with F's down the C column with a 7-letter word ending in the S, but that's going to score a lot less than something with Futons hitting the triple. So especially with a sizable lead, Jackson's decision makes a lot of sense. And I do, fortunately for me, draw a bingo, and I've got a decision to make. Errands plays either with A or with Fs. So which one should I do? I ended up playing it under AY, mostly because I felt I'm still going to be down after this play. Remember, even though I'm scoring 67 points, that's only going to bring me to 318, so I'm still going to be down 16 points plus whatever Jackson scores on his next turn, which is still a sizable deficit. And as such, I figured I might actually need to try to bingo again to win this game, and thus leaving the nice 7 line down the C column with Fs with 2 S's unseen as well as 2 T's for F'd would work in my favor. So that's the main reason why I decided to play it down here. Jackson, once again, thankfully for me, doesn't draw anything great, but he finds a really nice play, Tropin, through the pie, making Joe an N for 31 points. He could score more with something like Hod, but his play is way better because it gets rid of another consonant, and the H is a super nice scoring tile for him to have. And given how clunky the pool is from Jackson's perspective, I'm super unlikely to bingo, and so is he. This game is likely to be decided by who has the better scoring tiles in the endgame, not who bingos again, because it's extremely unlikely either of us are going to bingo. So a very savvy play here by Jackson. And I draw an interesting rack here. Not great. The UV combo is particularly toxic, but I do have a decent number of vowels, which is nice. And I end up playing Prow for 39 points in the bottom right-hand part of the board. I actually strongly considered playing Prowl like this, which looks weird because the UV combo, like I said, is super toxic. But the reason I considered this is I noticed that there is still a huge X spot open. What's been very strange, guys, about this game, and as Jackson and I discussed extensively after the game ended, is that throughout the game, there were tons of big Z spots and tons of big X spots. And that remained true pretty much all the way up until the end. But yet, as you guys can see, there's only 7 tiles left in the bag, and neither the Z nor the X have appeared on either of our rocks. So that's going to make for a very interesting endgame, as you guys will see. But in any case, I considered Prowl like this because I knew if I drew the X, I could then play XU for 52 points next to the A and N of Canonic on the F column. With Prowl with the U, yes, the O works a lot better than the U with the V, but now I'm not threatening XU, and I'm not going to have all that great an X play if I do draw the X. In the end, I decided it was more important to get rid of the U here than it was to go for that X play, because I figured Jackson is also very often going to play there himself. With 2 Bs and an H, 2 tiles that also fit very nicely in that same spot, I didn't think the X spot was likely enough to stay open to justify the significant equity hit that I would be taking by keeping the clunky UV combo. So I think I made the right decision here playing Prowl with the U. And now this is where things get even more bizarre, because from Jackson's perspective, he still doesn't have either the X or the Z, and he has no idea whether I have them. He's sitting with an 8-point lead, which is far from comfortable given the clunkiness of the unseen tile pool. As you can see from his perspective, with 3 in the bag, the unseen tiles he is looking at are ILMORSSVXZ. And he's got actually a pretty good rack here. And he has a very high scoring option of Bath for 42 points, which he strongly considered. He elected not to play this, the main reason being 2 things. Number 1, he'd be emptying the bag. Emptying the bag is always a risk in these kind of close positions because you're giving your opponent perfect knowledge of your rack, and that allows them to plan precisely in the endgame as opposed to leaving them some uncertainty. The other thing Jackson didn't like about this play is that by drawing 3 tiles from the bag, he's increasing his chances as opposed to if he just plays 1 or 2 tiles of pulling some of the stuff he doesn't want. Jackson does take a sizable lead with this play. He'd be going up 50 points, but if he pulls, say, VXZ or something like that out of the bag, then I'm going to be able to go out in 2 and catch him with a huge number of unplayed points on his rack and probably overcome that deficit. So Jackson was very worried about nightmare draws here, where he pulls at least 2 of the VXZ and possibly another clunky tile, and or I have a very strong out in 2 and I can actually make up this 50-point deficit. It's not as unlikely as it might seem that I'll be able to win after Bath despite starting down 50 points. So Jackson considered this, but I think wisely decided not to do it. And instead, he decided to play Ebb for only 17 points. So a massive sacrifice of points, a 25-point sacrifice. But he now is accomplishing 2 things. Number 1, he's not emptying the bag. By leaving 1 tile in the bag, he makes it harder for me to accurately plan for an out in 2. And number 2, he's now only drawing 2 tiles as opposed to 3. So that reduces his chances of pulling a lot of the clunky high pointers, namely the V, the X, and the Z that he wants to avoid. Ironically, like I was saying before, there were huge X and Z spots open throughout the game. but at this point, most of them have been exhausted, and the X and the Z are now almost a liability because they might be very difficult to play off efficiently, and whoever has them might end up getting caught with them in the endgame and losing as a result. So Jackson actually wants to avoid them here. I think Ebb is a very solid play, especially because he saves the H, which goes really well in two spots. For one, he can still play it next to the A of Canonic and do something like Hod, which will score over 30 points. And if that gets taken, he also has the ability to play in the same spot as Bath. He doesn't have Bath anymore, but he might maybe draw an M to play Math, or at the minimum, he can also play Hod, making her an Oda for about 30 points as well. So I think this is a very solid play by Jackson. Another interesting possibility, and it looks super weird, is to just play Ab for 10 points, dropping a single tile. Now, this is giving up even more on the scoreboard, scoring 10 instead of 17 for Ebb or 42 for Bath, but now Jackson only has one tile he's pulling out of the bag, and thus he is going to leave me to deal with at least two of the V, the X, and the Z. And he's also going to leave me two in the bag. And two in the bag is a little bit tougher from my standpoint than one in the bag, because that's even more uncertainty and possibilities I have to reckon with in terms of planning my final sequence. The other nice thing about Ab is it blocks a lot of nice plays I might have in that spot. True, there's no possibility of XU anymore, but I could play something like Vax or Zax, which is going to score 30 or more points, and again, help me offload those troublesome high-scoring tiles. So Jackson definitely does have an interest in blocking that spot. And we discussed this at length, including with several other top experts. This was such an interesting game that there was a huge mob of skilled players looking at it after, and the general consensus was actually that Ab might have been a better play for Jackson. Super difficult to know, but fascinating position. Let me know if you guys have any thoughts in the comments, but in any case, I think Jackson was on the right track here with Ebb. He definitely should not be emptying the bag. And now the difficult decision came back to me. I had ILORSSV. So other than the V, a great rack. And now I'm thinking, like, what the heck is going on here? There's still an X and a Z, and Jackson didn't play either of them. So I figured most likely Jackson didn't have either of those tiles. I figured if he had the Z or the X, he would want to make an effort to play it off, because he would be looking at the unseen pool and being afraid of getting the other one. And again, the last thing anyone wants is to have to deal with both the Z and the X in this endgame on this board. So I figured, okay, the Z and the X were probably both in the bag when Jackson played Ebb. And what does that mean? Well, that means the bag, which consisted of 3 tiles, was the Z, the X, and some other tile. So I've got a 2 in 3 chance of drawing either the Z or the X, and a 1 in 3 chance of drawing whatever that other tile was. And I realized pretty quickly that drawing the Z or the X was not going to be a good thing for me, because again, it is not easy to play those tiles on the board. I also realized that if I want any chance of winning, which again is probably going to require me drawing whatever that third tile out of the bag is, I'm going to need to go out in 2. I'm down 25 points, I don't have a lot of scoring power here, and the only way I'm going to win this game is if I go out in 2 and probably catch Jackson with a significant amount of unplayed tiles on his rack, which might not be that hard to do, especially if he has both the Z and the X. Now, I quickly realized I had to block the A in Canonic, because like I said, I'm sort of hoping I don't draw either the X or the Z, in which case, by definition, Jackson's going to have both of them. And if he gets Zax down for 35 points through that A, offloading both of them, I'm completely sunk. So I figured I got to either play through this A or next to this A in a way that obstructs Zax. That's absolutely mandatory. And I pretty quickly came up with the play of Verls and Fs for 16 points. It's not a lot of points, but it blocks Zax, and with just an O and an S left, I am often going to be going out on my next play. In fact, almost always. And not only that, I often have fairly high scoring outplays. For instance, I saw if I draw the H, I'm going to be threatening Hose for over 30 next to Canonic, as well as next to the ER and DA on the bottom right as well for nearly 30 points. If I draw the M, I'm similarly threatening Mose next to the A and O of Canonic, as well as Som for a healthy score on the bottom right as well. So the H and the M felt like tiles to me that were likely going to win me the game if I pulled them after Verls. I also noticed that the X might actually make things interesting, because I'm now threatening Socks for about 30 points in several spots. I'd be threatening Socks with Sir and Oda on the bottom right, as well as next to the A and O of Canonic, as well as with Ebbs. So things might be kind of interesting if I end up drawing the X. And because of all that, I ended up going with Verls. I had a decent amount of time to think about my options here, and again, I felt like I had a pretty solid chance with either the H or the M, and I didn't have time to fully calculate it, but I thought I might even win with the X, despite, once again, thinking initially I was sunk if I drew either of the X or the Z. So I ended up going with Verls, and lo and behold, I drew the X. So that left Jackson with a final rack of ADHMOTZ. And like I said, I've got 3 different places to play Sox for around 30 points, and Jackson obviously can't address all of them. So Jackson's going to need to figure out a way here to score some points and get rid of some of these high-scoring tiles to outrun my 30-point outplay, and it's not easy for him to do. In fact, he has only a single play that does it, and it's not easy to see. I didn't come up with this while I was going through all the possibilities with Verls, but to his credit, he found it. It's Matzo for 34 points with 2. This puts Jackson at 416. I have nothing better to do than go out with Sox for 30, so that brings me to 403. I get 12 more points from Jackson's unplayed D and H, and I end up losing by a single point with the final score 415 for me, 416 for Jackson. So this, guys, is how this absolutely wild and amazing game ended. Huge credit to Jackson. He played super strongly throughout this whole game, and a really clutch only win endgame to finish it off. A well-deserved win for him. But we're not done here. I still want to address the issue of, was Verls my correct play? As we just saw, my play of Verls loses narrowly if I draw the X. It's very easy to see I'm going to lose if I draw the Z because I'm going to have no outplays, and Jackson can easily outmaneuver me and win. It turns out that my hunch was more or less correct. After Verls, the engine Macondo confirms that I do win with a draw of an H or an M, and interestingly, I actually also tie if I draw the A. Let me quickly show you guys how all of those variations would play out. If I draw the H, then like I said before, I'm going to win because Jackson can't deal with both of my 30-plus point outplays. His best option would be Moxa, which scores 42, but the problem is he's going to end up caught with the Z, and that's going to decide the outcome of the game. I go out with Show for 33, I get 26 more points from his unplayed DTZ, and I would win by 8, 432 to 424. If instead of that I draw the M, then his best bet is Zoa and Atropine, a sneaky play that scores 41, but he's leaving himself a whopping 15 points on his rack, DHTX. So I go out with Mose for 25, and even though I'm still down 25, I get 30 bonus points and end up eclipsing him, winning by 5, 428 to 423. The tie I mentioned if I draw an A is actually rather anticlimactic because Jackson, now with the extremely ugly DHMOTXZ, has nothing better to do than Zax for just 19 through the A of Plagued, at least getting rid of his 2 highest scoring tiles, and with AOS, my highest scoring outplay is Asa, a rarely seen 4-letter word with 2 S's in the middle, for just 6 points, and then I get 22 more from Jackson's unplayed tiles, and the game ends at a 401 to 401 tie. I'll leave it as an exercise to the viewers to show that if I draw any tile other than the A, the H, or the M after Verls, then Jackson's going to be able to score enough points to beat me. The main reason is that he's always going to be threatening at least Max, if not Moxa, down the F column for a lot of points, and I'm not going to be able to outrun that. So Verls winning 2.5 out of 8 times, if we assume the tile in the bag is random, which it's not, as we discussed earlier, because Jackson's play of Ebb almost never leaves either the X or the Z, so I'm assuming that when he played Ebb, 2 of the 3 tiles in the bag were the Z and the X, and the third was random. So to win after Verls, I am going to need to not only avoid the Z and the X, which only happens with 1 out of 3 probability, but also hope that that third tile, if I draw it, is one of the H or the M, or an A for a tie. So really there's only 6 other tiles that could be in the bag besides the Z and the X, and there is a 2 out of 6 chance that that third tile is the H or the M, and a 1 out of 6 chance it's the A. So actually, 2 out of 18, 2 out of 6 times the 1 out of 3 chance I draw that third tile, 2 out of 18 times I win, and 1 out of 18 times I tie after Verls again, under the assumption that the Z, the X, and some other tile were in the bag when Jackson played Ebb. Not super promising, but it's something, and is it the best I can do? I assumed it was the best I could do initially, because like I said, it looks like a great play. It blocks the potential for Jackson to play Zax through the A, and it keeps OS, which is going to give me a lot of high-scoring outplays. However, the Macondo engine actually finds a better option for me. Saver for 16 through the A of Canonic. This play looks worse at first because it feels like it's going to be a lot harder for me to reliably play out with ILS. However, according to Macondo, Saver will win if I draw any of the A, the M, the O, or the T, and I will show you guys why in a moment. So that means my odds of winning now, instead of 2 out of 18 win and 1 out of 18 tie, go up a bit. Yes, I still have to avoid the X and the Z, but now there's a 4 out of 6 probability that the third tile in the bag besides the X and the Z is a winner. So that means the odds of me winning are 1/3 times 4 out of 6, which is now 4 out of 18. Considerably better than 2 out of 18 winning and 1 out of 18 tying. So Saver, given what I drew, would not have won, but in theory would have been a better play. Now let me show you all of the variations. Once again, A, M, O, and T all win. It's very easy to see that the X and the Z lose for me, so I'm not going to go over those. It's pretty easy to see that I win with an A draw because, once again, Jackson's rack is so bad he has nothing better to do than Zach's for 19. I have several winning out plays here, my best one of which is Lias for 17 points down the B column, and I win easily 412 to 401. If I draw the M, then Jackson responds with Zoa and Atropine for 41 points, a play we looked at in an earlier line. However, I have a sneaky high-scoring outplay. I can play Slim, making T and for 27 points, and that's going to be enough. After getting 30 more points from Jackson's unplayed tiles, I win by 7, 430 to 423. If I draw the O, I will end up eking it out, but it's not easy to see why. Jackson's best play with a rack of ADHMTXZ would be the sneaky Matzo for 25 through Tropin and Saver, and now I go out with Oils for 13 under Errands, and I end up winning by a point, 408 to 407 when all is said and done. My final winning line after Saver, drawing a T, is also extremely difficult to calculate. Jackson now responds with Zoa, like we saw before, 41 points, but he's keeping DHMX, which is going to net me 34 points in penalties after I go out, and I have a single winning outplay here, the difficult to see Tills through the L of Plagued hooking estimates, and that brings me to 390. I get 34 points, and I end up winning once again just by 1 point, 424 to 423 in this line if I draw the T after Saver. Now, that exhausts all of my winning lines after Saver. As I mentioned before, it's easy to see I lose if I draw the X or the Z. It turns out if I draw the D or the H, I lose as well. I'll quickly show you why on both of those. If I draw the D, then just as in the actual game, Jackson's one and only winning play is Matzo for 34. This time, my best outplay is Dills for 18, in the same spot I won with Tills in the last line, and just like in the actual game, Jackson wins 416 to 415 in a 1-point nail-biter. Finally, an H draw isn't going to cut it for me after Saver because of the same thing. Jackson responds with Matzo once again, and I play Hills for 20, this time falling short by 3, 413 to 416. So there you have it, guys. Once again, in this position, Saver, my best play, winning with an A, an M, an O, or a T. This is a bit better than the play I made of Verls, which wins with an H or an M and ties with an A, but loses with everything else. Like I said, given I drew the X, I was going to be sunk either way, but still very instructive to see why Saver is better. Extremely, extremely difficult to calculate all of these lines, especially given I didn't have a huge amount of time on the clock, so I can't beat myself up too much. What I think is also super amazing about this pre-endgame is that so many of these lines, both the winning and the losing lines for me, I just showed you guys, are decided by a single point. So if you literally change the initial starting position by 1 point in either direction, this whole video would have been very different. And I think that's just amazing. Like, the fine details of a position, even just a single point, can really matter so much in determining what your best play is. So I know this is already a long video, guys, but there was a lot to cover. I hope you found that instructive and interesting. Huge shout out to Jackson for this awesome game. He played great. Always a pleasure playing him. Thanks to all you guys for watching the video. Really appreciate all your support. Let me know what you think of this game in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you all soon for the next video. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.